First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to come here. It's my first time in Estonia, but as far as I've seen so far, it's not the last one. I need to come back as a tourist at one point to have more time to see. Let me first start with a short introduction on as to who I am. My name is Pia, as I think you said earlier, and I work currently and have been for the past 4 years in the Ministry of Finance, directing a group implementing financial and strategic management in the public sector. But before that, I worked as a consultant traveling around the public sector in Denmark, designing and implementing and making efficiency analysis all through the institutions and agencies around Denmark. And as regard to the topic today, which I normally speak about day and night, I'm not used to doing so in English, however, so I hope I will be able to make myself understandable. Otherwise, I understand you have the possibility to ask questions afterwards, so please do so. During my presentation today, I'll try and answer 4 questions. How public services is developed in Denmark and what the role of performance-based budgeting is in the service development. And also where Denmark is in terms of combining strategy, services and budgeting, and what the Danish experience are and what the Danish tools are to achieve more efficient public sector services. But just to frame that, just a little bit about Denmark. I might be pushing the wrong... Okay, someone put a... Sorry about this. Denmark is, like Estonia, a very small country. In Denmark, we have a relatively large welfare sector. But with the growing elderly population and the development in demographics, we have still to focus even more on efficiency and increased productivity, as I guess is the case for you as well. A little bit more about Denmark. The public sector has 3 layers of government. In the central layer, we have 19 ministries, about 130 agencies underneath those ministries, and the 34 self-owned higher education institutions. At the local level, we have the regions, 5 regions, which you can see on the map is the different colors, and 98 municipalities that conducts the public services. The regions and the municipalities are also politically run. They have their own elections and therefore their own political agendas on top of or underneath the central political agendas. So the 5 regions primarily run the hospitals in the Danish public sector, whereas the 98 municipalities runs childcare, elderly care, employment centers, and so on, which really makes them the primarily public service provider, or those closest to the citizens. The difference between the regions and the municipalities is that the municipalities can lever tax themselves, which means that they have a bit more autonomy in the way that they conduct the services, a bit more freedom. So all in all, you can say that the Danish public sector is relatively decentralized, which also means that there lies a great freedom, but also a great responsibility for the welfare services by the regions and the municipalities in Denmark. The central governments conduct the development of the welfare service policies and are implementing that through legislation. But most of the legislation in Denmark is frame registration, leaving the translation and the implementation and interpretation to the local government. And even in some cases to the institutions. And looking at that, the 19 ministries who are formulating the registrations, they are doing so sometimes in silos, meaning that historically there has been little coordination about between the registration areas of welfare. And this sometimes becomes a problem as the same silo organization is adopted by the local governments. So you have social services, you have environmental services, you have employment services. And for the institutions who actually provide the public services, this sometimes becomes a problem as citizens' needs are more complex. Sometimes the citizen have needs that goes across these government elements or government areas. And that sometimes brings complexity, or it brings complexity in the way they can actually implement and converting the strategies and policy into action. So, in relation to performance management, you can say that the local institutions is provided with one economic frame, but a multiple and silo-based performance measurement demands, which are divided into many silos, gives complexity, and sometimes the measurement they have to find is conflicting when they look at the specific citizens. And they have to make the combined service that helps the citizens. So in acknowledging this problem, the former government decided to conduct a new type of analysis to learn more about how central regulation turn into specific tasks for the employees, the welfare employees, for instance, in a municipality. And I here have two examples of these type of analysis, one for childcare services and one for elderly services. And what you can see here is that if you take the central regulation, the central legislation, and turn that into task and translate that into the time spent for the elderly nurse, for instance, 50% on average of the elderly nurse time is spent on doing tasks that are set to be done in national legislation. So, and only 11% of her time is not regulated. And the rest of her time is regulated by municipality regulation and or local management team putting in processes, documentation, demands, controls in order to secure the public services. So this type of analysis gives grounds to wonder if the national legislation perhaps is too detailed in some areas, or too regulative in some areas, but it also makes it possible to have an informed discussion on which regulations should be changed, should be altered, or even maybe should be removed. So this is a very interesting way of doing analysis. If we look at the budget and how the budget regulation is designed in Denmark, it builds upon the Budget Limited Act, which were introduced in 2012, which I guess you have as well, putting in annual limits of the yearly budget and have sanctions in place, put in place for those who actually not meet the budget limits or break the budget limits. Underneath that, you will find the annual Finance Act for the central government, and for the local governments, we have what we call a annual finance agreement. The state annual Finance Act is a detailed description of what the ministries are supposed to do and what they're supposed to perform, and are in general performance-based in the budget. And I'll give you an example of that in just a short while. The local government's annual finance agreement is an aggregated budget frame divided into the budget frame for services and a budget frame for investments. The agreement itself has a wide range of activities and performance demands, but the link between the budget and the demands are not direct, meaning that the local government can, in fact, has some freedom to be local, you could say. And finally, at the end, the institutional budgets, the budgets for the agencies and the budgets for the institution in the municipalities, both the budget and the performance measures for those institutions are agreed upon locally. So So this leaves a great responsibility and also freedom for the local top management team in order to actually decide how they want to perform their core tasks they're put in place too. But also leaves the responsibility in the local institutions as to improve the public service within the frames that they are giving. So developing public services is a very local thing in Denmark. I'll just show you a short example of the Finance Act for the central government. This is for the Agency of Transportation, and this is just to show that in general we have some sort of performance angle in this. So what you see on the left side is the main task that this agency should be doing, and this is further elaborated in the middle column. Saying, okay, what do we mean by regulation? What do we mean by approvals, audit, and so on? And at the last column, you see the budget split between those main tasks. But as you also can see, if you can read what it says up there, is that it's relatively high level. So again, you have quite a few freedoms and possibilities and ways in which you can actually meet the requirements in this type of budgets. So if we look at the management of the Danish public sector in a historic perspective, it has been transformed via reforms since the 80s, since the early 80s, and the administrative issues has been a part of political, the policy for shifting governments all through the time. Every government since 1983 has had a modernization programs, and although the framing and the words used and the instruments pushed have been different, they all have had the same focus, namely to ensure the largest possible outcome, and doing so by forcing or pushing efficiency improvements, increasing productivities, and trying to make deregulations. So, and also they all agree upon that the citizen should be put in the center of all public services instead of regulations. And this is sometimes hard, as I said before, when you have silo-created regulation. It is sometimes very hard to put the citizens at center of the actual service provided to the citizen. Yes. So the focus on efficiency have a great weight in the instrument used over the years. And this is based on an understanding that the value creation will increase if the public employees focus on service delivery and if the public employees focus on innovating their everyday work. And the understanding is also that this focus is best achieved through economics incentives and economic pressures. However, as I may have indicated, we see a shift in how the pressures actually performed, or the pressure in how to perform better is actually achieved. Traditionally, we have had a pressure inside out from the government to the institution for them to do it cheaper, better, more service for less money. But now we see a shift where we also have the pressure outside in. And a few words about both the instruments that have been used during time and also why the shift is. Since 2015, we have had the so-called annual reprioritization. That's a very difficult English word, contribution. But what it means is that every institution all over public sector has to reduce their budgets with 2% every year. And has been doing so since 2015. However, this has become increasingly difficult to actually achieve as all the easy-picked efficiency improvement has been harvested. So for this reason, the contribution has been widely criticized, and now we see that for some sectors, for instance, hospital, universities, and cultural institutions, they have removed this measure or this target. What we also do in Denmark, as we just talked about before me coming up here, is the spending reviews. So that's the second instrument, where we take one unit at a time and analyzing that unit in order to find a more efficient way of conducting the work done. And thereby also cutting local budgets. So we put some money back into the government. But as the opportunities for discretionary budget cuts are getting smaller and smaller, we see a renewed focus on actual deregulation. And the former government completed several initiatives in this regards. The first one is the thorough investigation, which I showed you a few examples of earlier on the care, the child care and the elderly care sector. Creating the visibility of the burdens coming from the legislation, and thereby giving a basis for considering which regulation should be changed, removed, or improved. Another initiative the former government put in place was the so-called report a rule, which was a central mailbox where all citizens, professionals from public and private sector could put in suggestions on how to actually get deregulations. So that was sort of and I can say it was a huge success. There was many suggestions that came in that way. The former government also put in a challenging panel where experts in the field of public services were gathered and brainstormed and were told to challenge the sitting government in ways that could actually make the welfare policy more relevant to the day. Yes. So a shift in how the pressure on keeping the efficiency and productivity increase is definitely seen. We just had a new government in Denmark. They talk about the pressure going outside and in as well. We don't know what the initiatives will be yet, but I think we will continue in this way in Denmark. However, I really can't see us ever giving up on spending reviews, which we've been doing for many years in Denmark in different contexts. So I think we'll be doing that as well. So if we look for a moment to the local institution and local management, the Ministry of Finance has put out a vision as to how local management should be. And the vision says that management should be simple and it should be value-adding, and no one can disagree in that. So in order to put a bit more to it, we elaborated it into 5 themes. The most important being the condition that you have to have a clear strategic direction on what you are doing, why you are doing it, and what you are trying to achieve by doing it. And this seems to be very easy task, but it's actually quite hard for us to ensure that the translation through the whole system, from government to local government to the institutions to the employees, that they have a common vision of the goal that we're actually trying to achieve. So a clear strategic direction is the fundamental for achieving a simple and value-adding management system. But in order to deliver the expected value, you also need to have effective operations, meaning that the managers, the local managers, should be able to translate and to translate the strategy and the visions into actual actions. So what are we doing every day? Who is doing it? Do we have the right resources on the right tasks, and it also requires that you know something about what the individual task actually costs. What are the costs of doing this and this and this? So, and you also, and that's what we call coherent management, have to have control over your finances and a close follow-up system so that you know that the funds are actually used for the purposes that they are giving to. And however, the most important resources we have in public sector is the people actually in Denmark. And you need, in order to create innovation, you need to believe that they actually are doing the best every day to create the value so they go to work actually to do a good job. Sometimes the lyrics in Denmark has been a bit hard in this way. So we say we need to trust the employees. They want to do a good job, but they have to do it within the frame that they actually know what the common goal is. So we need people to be creative, we need people to be innovative, so we need managers just to put up the right frames for the people to actually have the opportunity to be creative. And finally, the fifth element, data-informed decision-making, meaning that in order to continuously improve and innovate the value created in public services, we need to use data better than we do today. We need to use data to learn, and we need to use data in order to make better decisions. In this framework, however, we also stress that it's very important for the management across the strategy and finance and operation to connect, and this is what we call coherent management. So agreeing on a strategic direction does not actually add much value if the resources are not allocated in alignment with this strategy. So there is a natural and logic value chain saying that first we decide on the strategic goals, then we allocate the resources, then we evaluate and maybe change the strategic direction so we can create better values, and then so on and so forth. However, the normative behavior at local level sort of disrupt this logical value chain, meaning that if I was a local director, I would say if I had 10 millions this year, I need 10 millions next year as well. If I had 5 people to do the task this year, I need 5 people again, even though I was not doing a direct public service, but I was doing a development project-based work. So the normative behavior challenged this, and we do see at central level some agencies where the detailed budget allocation has actually for the following year has been closed and done before the top management even begins to talk about what strategic goals they want to achieve in that year, and that's something we implementation-wise has worked quite a lot on. So where are we in Denmark in terms of budget compliance and performance management? I take in a few examples here, a few data points. Up until 2000s, we had quite a big problem in Denmark in complying to budgets. We have severe overruns on budgets in municipalities and regions, and also in central governments. But as you can see, we sort of conquered that problem. This side of the figure shows the budget accuracy in 2018 for the municipalities and the central governments. And although we thrive for 100%, this is not bad and it's very good. The regions are not on it because they actually managed to achieve 100%. I don't know how they did it, but they did. But looking at performance management, this gives us, from an implementation perspective, the opportunity to shift our focus more to from the input side to the output side. So, is government institution getting better at managing their output? As you can see on the blue columns, you can see that we see a positive development. What the figure shows is the development in central agencies' performance metrics from 2012 to 2019, and it shows that 40% of the metrics are focusing on service quality or on organizational development. But we still have a long way to go. We would like that to be close to 100% as well. The rest of the metrics focus on activities. Have we done a conference? Yes. Have we made a new legislation? Yes. So metrics that are easy to measure, and that's one of the dilemmas that we still see in public sector, that you tend to put metrics up in performance and relating to budget that are measurable, and that is sometimes not the ones actually focusing on the value you create when you go to work. So if we assume, and we do so in Denmark, that the best way of improving performance in the public sector is done locally, how do we set directions from a central level that allow the freedom locally for that performance innovation to take place? And I do apologize, you probably won't be able to read this slide, but I'll tell you what the headlines are. This is an example of outcome goals set from a national level on social mobility. And this instrument setting outcome goals nationally is a trend we have in Denmark, where about 6 different welfare areas now have national goals. And on this social affairs, they have 10 goals divided into 2 areas. The first area, the first 5 goals, says that more people should be in the labor force. And then in the underlying goals, for instance, it says that more people with disabilities have to enter education and employment. So that's just a breakdown of that. And also in the last 5 goals say that we have to thrive for fewer marginalized people. And one of the goals underneath that is to have fewer homeless people. So the idea is to set a strategic direction from the top level, but not instructing the local institution, the local governments, as to how to meet the goal. So we want fewer homeless people. Go find creative ways to ensure that we have fewer homeless people, because we think that that would be helping us in having fewer marginalized people in Denmark, for instance. Yes. So bottom line, there are many dilemmas in performance budgeting, and I'll just like to elaborate a bit on 3 of those as the last thing in my presentation. The first one is to understand the link between input and output. We often, as I said earlier, tend to put up metrics and measure on the input side or the activities that we actually do because they are measurable. I believe in Denmark we are getting better and better also to put up metrics and measurements for the output side. But what we still have a long way to go on is understanding the value chain between the input and the output. So what is it that we do that actually creates value for the citizens? So, and I have a colleague who says, I know how much food I give my chicken, and I know approximately how many eggs the chicken lays, but exactly what happens within the chicken, I'm not quite sure. And this is the problem we face in public sector as well. We don't know what happened within the chicken because those who are putting up the metrics are often a bit too far away from those who actually knows what happens within the chicken, and that is sort of the distance that we need to address. Also, another problem is to balance the political ambitions and needs and those political needs to show actions with the local flexibility that allows and ensures innovation and allows higher value creation tomorrow than we had today. And the system, and I guess it's the same as you, that one event, one citizen with a loud voice sometimes causes a regulation, a new regulation, putting more regulation and therefore putting local innovation and professional pride under pressure. So we need to constantly be aware, political and employees, on how to balance this dilemma on ambitions and on local innovation and freedom locally to innovate. The third one is the need for professional specialization, and at the same time providing cross-disciplinary efforts for the citizens. So if citizens have a complex need, we need very specialized people to work together in order to help the citizens. And this is a true dilemma, because if you're very specialized within your field, which we need strong professionals in public sector to address all the complexity that we have, but we also need them to be able to be pragmatic so that they can create the right value and the right solutions for our citizens. And that is also a true dilemma that we have. And these dilemmas, 3 dilemmas, have been on the top of the political agenda in Denmark for a while now. We haven't solved them, but we still and constantly are trying to put in or adjusting the frames so that the public sector is able to perform better. So, this was it. I hope my presentation gave you a small view into how we are handling performance-based budgeting in Denmark. And furthermore, I hope I answered the 4 questions in a satisfactory way, and that you could understand what I was saying. So thank you for listening. Thanks again for inviting me here, and hope you have some good questions.
Thank you, Pia. Please sit down.
Yep.
It was definitely very clear. Especially for me, it was a wonderful example with this chicken.
Yeah.
Very good. Now I'm ready to ask about budgeting.
Yes.
In English.
Perfect.
Yeah. For first one, what weighs more in state budget process? Political decisions or performance information-based decisions?
Sometimes there's not a conflict between those two, and that's when it's good.
Danish politicians don't listen to us right now.
All right.
Can't be.
All right, yeah. All right. But because, for instance, if you look at the Finance Act for central government, they actually, when they decide on the budget, politically they decide also what the main tasks for the agency should be. So in that way, they are quite close to what, in which way they want to do use the public money, I guess.
But how well you are supported to do different ways by society or by politicians?
I guess the trust in public sector in general has been under pressure in Denmark, as it has been in many other countries. I don't think we are there where it's a really dangerous position. I think most people value the welfare system. Most people would like it to be even better, but they understand the pressure of more elderly people, but they also have higher demands all the time as to what we can do. Mm-hmm. So, of course, there's a conflict there. But, yeah.
How much has the report rule helped you? How did you get people engaged?
Actually, we changed the mindset. So in Denmark, for 5-10 years ago, we were very normative. in putting in management regulations, whereas now we put out like the vision for local managers, which are not a regulation, it's just a normative way of talking about how are you a good leader, how do you conduct management in a good way. And then we support by writing about the good cases and holding conferences like you to spread the good ways of doing things.
How difficult this change was?
I think it was necessary also due to your trust question. So we had to change for people to feel that they were taking serious, for the professionals to actually feel that they had to participate in innovating often public sector.
So can you see similarities with Estonia, and if, then what?
Unfortunately, I don't know so much about you, but you're a small country with a small economy, and I think we both are very focused on digitalization as a mean of creating efficiency and a stronger and better public sector. So I think that's similar. I think our problems might be similar as well, but I don't know Estonia that well.
So one question more about the reporting system. How is your reporting system organized?
It's a bit different from sector to sector, but if we look at the municipalities, for instance, all the bookkeeping is done in the same financial ledger. Not the same systems in the municipalities, but at the same ledger. And the ministry for the municipalities are collecting that and reporting on the finance for that. It's a bit more difficult on the performance issue in the municipalities. If we look at central governments, we have the same systems. We use the same IT systems for both HR and economics and performance measurements. So there we have a easier way of actually following. And some of the data I brought here about the development in metrics is done because we have the data set. So we actually we count and we put on types of metrics, and then we can follow the development and use that to talk to agencies on why do you have so many measurements, or why are they not outcome focused, and so on. So we use that to implement.
You said that it's a little bit difficult in local governments. Why?
Because we don't have collected data, so we don't actually know how it works and how it is. So and if you don't know that, you don't know if there's anything to fix or how to fix it, what the problem might be. And that's the consequence of them having great local autonomy.
Which countries you follow as best practice?
Sorry,
Which countries you follow as best practice?
I think Denmark has been in the front, so we don't. We are very arrogant in that way. I think we still go out and try to find good examples, but often because we have been so digitalized, like you are, we often perform better than many other countries.
And there is maybe a reason to come back to Estonia again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very good, Pia.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And one little present for you, Pia. Our Estonian handmade chocolate.
Nice.
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you.